Hey everybody, welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. Christina Luconi is Chief People Officer at Rapid7, a cybersecurity company that has been around for a while, went public in 2015, between 3 and 4,000 folks now. And I wanted to have Christina on to talk a little bit about what she's seeing in this let's call it the kind of the newer generation at work, and how some of the experiences that we've all been through in the past couple of years may have changed how people are perceiving work and how we're thinking about it. Not that Christina doesn't claim to have any magic answers, but I do hope to ask some magic, have her kind of interrogate some magic questions to help us all think a little bit further about this. Christina, thank you for coming on Great Mondays Radio.
Thank you for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
So, tell me a little bit. So Rapid7 cybersecurity. You've been there. What did you say? You joined when you were 200. There were 200
Yeah, I
people.
joined when we were 75 people, the
Oh
first
my
day of
gosh.
2011, and so I'm coming up on 14 years, which if you knew me would be laughable, right? I think I have shared with you, I kind of identify as a startup junkie. I've done 6 of them. I love building things from scratch, but there have been some pretty compelling reasons to stay here, which I'm sure we'll get into. But working for a CEO who actually genuinely cares about culture
Hmm.
is probably first and foremost.
I think we all can, we're nodding our, I'm sure the audience is nodding their heads vigorously. We all want that. And of course, if we landed there, we'd probably fall in your footsteps. What I find interesting, and maybe you can tell us, give us a little quick background, the kind of the pre-Rapid7 of you, but what I think is interesting is what you're saying, and now your current experience gives you a unique perspective, right? So you're like, love rapid startups, been through a bunch of them, but now I've been through the whole cycle, and we've gone from 75 people to public. So you
Right.
have a really robust perspective, and that's, I think, what makes this such a valuable conversation. So let's just start back at the beginning. Give us the kind of the quick bio,
Sure.
some of the experiences, got into some of those startup-y worlds. Why should we listen to you? What's your cred?
I have no idea, but
I
I'll
know.
share my story, and if it resonates, then fantastic. I'll start with saying, like, my career is probably um yeah, I'm very, very grateful for it. And some of it was just being at the right place at the right time. I also worked my butt off. But I think, I started as I was a psychology major and thought I was going to go into some form of clinical work. And I think it's a horrible thing to admit about oneself. But, sort of halfway through my degree, I think I had this existential life crisis where I'm like, I don't think that I'm empathetic, but I don't think I have enough empathy to like sit quietly and listen to people talk about their problems all day, every day, which ironically is sort of what I do. But
Full
um,
circle.
my dad, who was a serial tech entrepreneur, said there is this thing called human resources, and it's sort of the intersection of psychology and business, and that might be something you'd be interested in. And what he was really saying was like, kid, you're going to need a job after college, so like start thinking. And I was fortunate enough to find a tech startup in Cambridge, Mass. I'm based in Boston, and this was before Cambridge really became, sort of the Silicon Valley of the East,
Yeah.
and the company went public about 3 weeks into my internship that
Oh my
summer,
God.
and I was a clueless 20-year-old, and I just thought, oh my God, if you get a bunch of really smart people working together towards a common goal, people make money, and there's like all this opportunity, and that's what I want to do because it's that easy, right? But when I graduated, I looked specifically at startups because I thought I'm gonna have a degree, but like, what the heck do I know? And somehow I sort of pieced together startups when if you are um, ambitious and have a great attitude, and a little bit of aptitude, you can go in and raise your hand and say, I'll help with that because there's always help needed. And your job goes from here to here really quickly. So I kind of figured that out pretty quickly. And I was really fortunate to land it wasn't a startup, but it was a hyper growth consulting firm. And it was the kind of company that I think people are trying to establish today. We had women in senior leadership roles. We had a
Mm,
trans person on the team.
mm.
And this is 1990. And it was just very different. We had people of color. And it was just this very forward thinking thing. So that was my first foundational experience in this space. And I thought it never occurred to me that that wouldn't be the case in other companies. So I
Right.
kind of went in thinking, well, this is what it's like. And they gave me the biggest gift, which was I was that really annoying 22-year-old that said, I think probably one of my first questions was, I don't even understand why I would call this human resources. Like my computer or my printer is a resource. A human being isn't. And if we're trying to build a company to scale,
Yeah.
we thinking about people that way. They should have said, Christina, go shut up and file or do whatever I was
Yeah.
supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And instead they said, why don't you go think about that? I
Yeah.
mean, what a gift to be given. And, with the bliss and ignorance of being a young person, I did that for a couple of years. I went to grad school at night because I thought, oh, it would be really helpful if I understood from the client perspective how this all works. So I did a couple of years internally, I did a couple of years externally. And then I cold called my way into this little company called Sapient, which was a startup at the time. And I think my pitch was, I don't think you have a people person on your website. If you're going to scale this thing, like you should probably be thinking about that.
Oh my
The
God.
only reason that worked was because we had two CEOs and they were probably 2 years older than me. We were a bunch of kids. I
Yep.
know this happens much more commonplace in today's world, but in the mid 90s, like that was ridiculous. And it was also such a blessing because, we had a bunch of 20-year-olds running a company that we took public. We scaled, I can't remember what the revenue thing was, but when I joined, we were probably 150 people. When I
Yeah.
left 4 years later, we were 3,000 in public. So it grew so quickly.
Yeah.
But they were very dialed into culture, and culture was not quite a thing yet, right? I mean, I think the only thing that I knew about culture
Agree.
was Peter Drucker's famous
Yep.
quote. But realistically, I was like, I think I can figure out how to do this. And we did. And I'd like to think I've gotten much better at it over the last couple of decades. But to be able to build a company with everyone sort of bought into the mission, moving, rowing the boat in the same direction, if you will, in a company like that was such amazing experience. And then I just sort of figured out I am a horrible HR person. Like I know enough to be dangerous. I don't mean to sell
Hmm.
myself totally short. But I have people that are really good at comp and benefits and recruiting. And,
You know
I
how to
can,
put together the team.
I can put together the team, but I think my special sauce is helping companies figure out how to scale with soul, if you will.
Yeah.
And I've been, a repeat offender there. So that's sort of what I've been focused on for the last couple of
Scaling
decades.
culture is no easy challenge. And wow, I mean, I bet you could write a book about your time at Sapient. That is just, that's the firm, right? Like that is the first truly digital firm. So that's incredible. As much as I want to hear about that, I want to move us fast forward
Sure,
to talk about what you're observing now at Rapid 7. So like you said, you've been there for a number of years through all the scaling, through multiple, hiring generations.
sure.
And we don't want to necessarily explicitly or lay the blame entirely on generations in this conversation. But the way that you framed it, I thought was interesting. And what we're talking about is where, well, the way that most people talk about this. Do I want to work at home? Do I want to work hybrid? Do I want to show up to work? But you have a more interesting way of framing it. Talk to me a little bit about this challenge, how you're seeing it, and then we can kind of dig in a little bit further.
Sure. I want to be really careful and preface, like, I don't want to blame the pandemic for anything. I don't want to, say one generation's better than the other or any of that. I'm just going to offer this from an observational standpoint,
Great.
which is, I think that having, now I'm in my mid 50s and I've sort of seen different evolutions of work styles and stuff. But a lot of my perspective comes from growing companies. And I do think that there's probably a different mindset that comes with joining a startup. Typically, if you join something like that, you expect to work really hard. You expect,
Mhm.
people are really committed to the mission, et cetera. I don't want to say large companies don't have that. I know a number of them do. But I think it's much easier when you're a smaller company to establish that. And one of the things that I've seen, and the reason that I was always, in for a couple of years, help a company get to an event and then jettison out and go figure out how to go do it somewhere else, was because in the back of my mind, I think I had this perspective that it was really hard to do that in a big company. And the people that you would attract to a company that's a couple thousand people is very different to the people that you would attract in a much smaller organization. That I've definitely found to be true. Not black and white, but general, as a general statement, I think that's true.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the pandemic hit, and at least from a tech, I'm coming from the tech ecosystem. Um, we had historically had this phenomenal culture that, we've won awards for and things have been really fantastic and whatever. To the point where the day we made the call to go home and,
Mhm.
and shelter in place, I think we were like the first company in Boston to do that. We were a couple days ahead of people. And our people lost their minds and said, I'm never going to be able to work at home. And, so much of our success is built on team relationships and, those moments in the hall when you catch each other and stuff.
Yep,
It's
yep.
gonna, quite frankly, suck. And of course, like everybody else, we said, please just trust us. Thank goodness we all have laptops and we can be productive. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Clearly, we are not mind
Yeah,
readers.
right. I
And
remember that.
you
It'll be
zoom
over soon.
ahead. And I'm very grateful because our company was really clear from the get-go, way before we ever knew that we were all going to be okay and we'd go back. We were very clear on the world has changed. The reality is we probably won't ever have the expectation that people would go back in 5 days a week, but we're going to be hybrid. Like if any of you are sort of bought into the fact that you want to be remote forever, that's not the company that we are. Part of our culture is about collaboration, and we have a pretty young population. So to think that you can get stuff done, but that's really different than doing really impactful work.
Wait a minute, wait a
And
minute. I want to highlight that. That's if I was writing an article, said it as a pull quote. Uh, the difference between getting stuff done and actually doing really impactful work.
yep,
And I think that is a great place to just put our finger for the moment, because there was, again, as long as we're having flashbacks of 2020, and there was, sort of mid to late 2020, I do remember people going, I'm getting a lot of shit done,
yeah,
right? And that was interesting. That was an interesting moment, and you're like, what does that mean? But I also appreciate that distinction, because it's you can answer a lot of emails, but what is the work that you're getting done?
right. So if you apply, like start there, right? And then have watched over the last several years what's ultimately affected culture as a result of that shift.
Yes.
So we had people that were, we all get used to, people are adaptable, that you're home for a while, everyone figured out how to get their stuff done and work. And there's some real benefits to working remotely because you can power through your email, you can do really focused work. There's lots of benefits to it. For me personally, I was really glad that we leaned into the hybrid piece because it allowed people to have those focused days or do whatever, but we didn't want to give up the element of being able to connect together. That's how trust is built. That's how relationships are built.
Yep.
And we were seeing a lot of the remote stuff becomes very transactional. Now, if you're in a small team and everyone knows each other, and great. And I'm not saying remote work is bad by any stretch. I'm just, again, sharing from my perspective that what I've seen happen, not just at Rapid7, but at a number of companies, things have become very transactional if people are home all the time. They're not as tied into work anymore. It's just sort of, I'm here to do a job. It's really hard to be connected to the mission or to the team or to the people. Again, unless you already have those pre-established relationships and things. And people have then become like work's been on the back burner. I do a job, and a
Yes.
job is really different from a career.
Yes.
And you see lack of loyalty and just sort of, okay, if I'm not going to be engaging or I'm not really truly feeling like I'm part of a team anymore, I might have more flexibility in my life. That's great. But now I'm just going to, this is crass, but like pimp myself out to the highest bidder. Because if somebody's willing to pay me $10 to sit in my house and do my stuff, and I don't necessarily have the connections, I'm just doing work that interests me, and my current company is asking me to work hybrid or in the office, and they're going to pay me $5, like I may choose to take the, the easier path. I don't have to pay commuting costs. I can get my work done. But I've seen people job jump so many times over the past couple of years because they don't have the culture piece anymore. They don't have that connection back
Mm,
to the team, the company, the mission of what the company is trying to do. It's just, I'm sitting here doing this work. Now, I am not suggesting people can't work effectively remotely. Lots of people can, but where I'm seeing the biggest difference is a generational difference. For folks like me who are like, I've been around, I know how to navigate building relationships. I know where to spend my
yeah.
time.
Yeah.
If I had to be out of the office for a significant period of time. But I look at some of the younger folks who joined the workforce during the pandemic, so they knew nothing else other than working remotely.
Yes.
And their perspective is, I don't want to have to work this hard. I don't want to, I've sort of grown up in a world where I want a job. I still want to make good money. I still want to be promoted. I'm still aspirational, but they don't know the benefits of what can be part of a really amazing culture because
Right.
they're choosing to say, you know, I opt to be remote. I opt to sort of go this on my own. And I have two daughters, one who's launched out into the world and just started her career a year ago. The other one is a senior in college. And like my older daughter said, I never thought that me wanting to be in the office for some period of time would actually be a competitive advantage. Because I think I probably brainwashed her because she listened to me for so many years. I think what she was saying was, I'm 22 years old. I have a college degree, but like, what the heck do I know about any of this?
That's right.
Who am I going to learn from? If I'm
Yeah.
at home, like I'm on Slack with people and I can build fun relationships, and thank goodness for Zoom and other forms of technology. I can't imagine going through the pandemic without being able to look at someone,
Yeah.
and how much we would have been derailed if we didn't have that. But for her, she's saying, like, I was looking at jobs and people were just saying, if you make me come to the office, I don't want to work here. And I
Yeah.
thought, what ridiculous missed opportunities are people, um, facing. So I think everyone kind of wants their cake and eat it too. I want to live a great lifestyle. I don't want to have to work so hard, but I do want a really good salary. I want to be promoted quickly. And I think we're missing out on some of those really essential,
Yeah.
you know, it's not just about you getting paid. You got to give something back too.
Well, so I want to bring up what I thought had said to me before we started recording. Do you want to live to work, or do you want to work to live?
Right.
I just think that's such a brilliant way to frame this, so that because we started this part of the conversation by saying, it's not really about, most people talk about hybrid or not, but what you're saying is it's a symptom of a mentality that
Yes.
people have. And you had the luxury or the benefit of experiencing an amazing culture a few times, and what the value of that is, and what it's like to work hard and then get that reward. And if you have entered the workforce during or since the pandemic, you haven't had that opportunity. A lot of people will say, well, I showed up to work, even before the pandemic, right? And it was like totally crappy, and like I've never worked for a good company. Okay, that's fair too.
Sure.
But we're missing what your argument is, that you can choose to work to live or live to work, right? And there's not
And
that
no
those are
judgment on
those
that,
are
right? I mean, that's a personal choice.
those are viable choices. Those are viable choices. But
Absolutely.
but what I think is what you're describing here is that this folks that are newer to work haven't even been given the opportunity to experience the upside of coming into work. What's worse, most organizations don't know how to articulate that.
Yes.
And they lean back on free lunch.
I think, I think you just nailed it, right? I mean, I think we all have personal choices to make. Not everybody wants to like have work be the primary focus of their life.
Sure.
And that is a completely valid choice. And I am not arguing that you have to work if you're really into work, nor do you have to like live your life, you know,
Yeah.
under a desk either. I mean, I think there's plenty of ways to add value and do great work. I think the thing that makes me really sad is that, you can look at so many memes. It bums me out so much. I don't know what's in my algorithm on Instagram, but like all these memes show up about people hating their jobs and hating work and
Yeah.
pretending to dial in
I'm on that same I'm
it
on that
drives me
same thread.
crazy
Yeah.
because like my personal experience has been, not everybody has the benefit of making choices. Sometimes people just need a job. If I put that aside, for a number of people that are probably listening to this, they do have opportunities. They can work at places, and work can be an amazing part of your life. You can work with people that share common interests about what it is you're actually doing.
Yeah.
You can find your tribe, if you will. You can
Hmm.
accomplish it. It's like being part of an amazing sports team. If you do it, if you've chosen wisely and you've found you don't just love their values, but the company's values match your own as well. And, and if you can find that and you get paid for it, like what an amazing thing. So I'm coming from a really unique perspective of I've only worked at companies with incredible cultures. It took me about 25 years before somebody pointed out, like, Christina, you were actually part of establishing the culture, because I would go in at the very front end of a company. It was the first thing I always did,
Yeah.
was to let's establish who we are and who we aspire to be. So I was working for companies that I wanted to be at.
Yep.
But I've spent my entire career trying to shape how do you create that for people? How do you create an environment where people feel like it's not a job? I am thriving. My life is better because I am at this place.
Yeah.
And I really am sad for folks that are just sort of like trying to game the system because they don't work. And I really don't buy the I can be more productive from home thing. Yes, we can all get shit done. We all want focus time to like power through stuff, but you can never replace, um, for me, it's not about days in the office. It's about your engagement with other humans and building trust and
Yeah.
building collaborative
Yeah.
relationships. Because that's when the good stuff happens. You and I could be slacking all day long, and we don't really trust each other yet because we've never met or we've never looked in
Yeah.
each other's eyes or whatever, just trying to work on something. That's very different than if you and I are walking down the hall and I say, hey, Josh, I just had this idea for something. Do you have 2 minutes to like brainstorm on this? Those impromptu moments are gold. And they're
Yeah.
not happening like they used to.
The overhead for, hey, can I get 10 minutes of your time? Here's my Calendly. Let's set it up. Let's get a Slack.
Exactly.
Let's get a thing. And you're
Yeah, so
like,
it's
no, I mean,
transactional.
there's something very emotional and energetic about it. And the other piece that I want to call up again is um, the experience, like what you learn from being in person and how we do that. So let's press this forward. And I'm gonna, well, why don't we, well, I'll put us on the spot. How do companies, and we'll just kind of ping pong back and forth. I think organizations don't aren't able to articulate what is ultimately beneficial about coming into the office a few times a week.
Sure.
My hobby horse has been the rebuilding and strengthening relationships in order to build trust.
Yes.
So I think that's number one. I'm gonna put that out there. That's
I
number
I
one,
am
which is,
aligned with you wholeheartedly.
so we need that because, like you said, can't just be over Slack and Zoom. So that's really important, rebuilding that trust. What else, in from, sort of pulling from your experience in our conversation, what else can an executive or someone, well, I guess you have to get the organization on board. I was just gonna say, writing the job rec, right? But like, it's like, what else do we say? Like, here is the reason we do this.
Sure. I think that's really the why is really important, and being transparent, which puts a lot of focus on, I would say, the CEO and the chief people officer to really work together to, if you go back to the foundational culture elements
Yep.
of the company and think about, who are we as an organization? What are we trying to do? I think one of the unique things that happened during the pandemic was we also had a crazy, um, I forget what we called it, but like talent was so hard to find, at least in the tech community during that time, that companies were scared to death that they were going to piss off their people and they were going to quit and they were going to
That
go somewhere else for
walking on eggshells.
ridiculous. So I think a lot of people walked on eggshells, and then you get into
Yeah.
a situation where you're kind of letting the inmates run the prison.
Yep.
And I think if you're just very transparent about why it is you're making the choices that you've made, I think that goes a long way. So when we started saying, well, before we ever went back to the office, we're going to be a hybrid company. We're not exactly sure what that's going to look like yet, but let us just be really clear about where we stand on this. And this is why. Most people got it. Some
Mm.
people, tried to argue and say, well, we've been working remotely for so long now, like that doesn't work for me. And to be able to be okay with saying, well, then this might not, you're really valuable to us. We'd love to keep you. But if that's where you sit on this issue, like it's okay. You're not wed to this place forever.
Yeah.
And it's hard to lose some good people. But if that's really what's important to your organization, not backing out of that for fear of, upsetting someone, I think becomes really important. So you got to kind of stand your ground a little bit and then be flexible enough to make adjustments. I was thinking of a question that it's shared as like your biggest failure. I
Yeah.
don't think I have a biggest failure. I've got a million little failures. And one of the failures was when we first started rolling out how we would bring people back in and stuff. We were pretty clear about what we wanted to do. We gave a lot of wiggle room for people to sort of, a lot of people are going through a lot at that point. We had mental health
Mm.
issues, had all kinds of
Yep.
stuff. So you
Yep.
have to be flexible enough to hear what people, what's going to work for people, et cetera. But I think we were probably like a little too um collaborative with our staff for a while because we were in the same place. We didn't want to lose a lot of people.
Yeah.
And finally, we're just like, we're not doing well as a company. Like we're seeing a direct correlation between how people are re-engaging with work and the performance of the business. So at least in this Boston ecosystem, I've seen so many CEOs almost create whiplash for their people, which is like, you can
Yes.
work from anywhere, you can be
Yeah.
remote. Their companies started struggling and then they're like, forget it, we take it back, everyone in the office, 5 days a week. And people had moved and, they
Yeah.
were pissed and
Yeah.
whatever. So
You're
I'm
destroying
really
that cultural trust.
totally destroying the culture. So I'm really grateful that we were really clear about what our intention was and why before we ever started bringing people back. But we definitely, it wasn't smooth. I'll say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've sort of
I mean,
navigated.
I haven't heard very many smooth stories.
No,
I mean, ultimately, the other thing that I picked up on that I think you just sort of tossed off, but I think is actually a gem, which is, and I think we're all, you know, recently, we were all watching the Olympics, and you're talking about being part of a sports team, and there's no remote sports teams, obviously, but what I will say is the experience of coming together and working towards something and succeeding to different levels is one of the best feelings.
I totally agree.
So we're really coming back around to purpose. We're really coming back around to like, why are we here? And I feel like, and I have this mental model of like that I use sometimes with clients, which is like, what are the value, like what is it that you're offering your employees? And you got to start at the bottom, and you got to start with your the compensation, and then the benefits, and then you go it's like you kind of move up and up and up and up, and at the top, towards the top, you have purpose, and you sort of have your own, like, what are you experiencing, what's your legacy, what are you taking away once you leave this organization? And it almost feels like what you're describing is we've all this extrinsic this experience that we've been through, the world has changed, and we're all of a sudden the we're all back at the bottom of the pyramid. We sort of just went and
Yeah.
everybody's like, how much money can I get? Right? That's exactly what you said. Where do I go? Da 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 da. And if you're competing at that level, you're losing.
Yes.
And so what we're sort of co-discovering here is that in order to be an effective, productive organization, you need to be re-emphasizing that, yes, you get all these things, but that's not it. This is more. There's more to it than that. We're doing this together, and this is what we're coming to.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most compelling piece, where it's like, and if you have the culture to support that, and people, oh, I love the way we're working hard. It's a human experience. It's more than money. I'm not saying you got to work. That's it. That, it's like you obviously you need your money, but that's where you're going to get that competitive advantage. That's what I
I,
hear in
I,
your
yeah, I think
articulation.
that is definitely how I think about it. Um, I'm really, really grateful because I've worked at some amazing places and, I don't do a lot of things well, but I'm really good at picking CEOs who I think get it.
Mm,
They certainly did at Sapient. There's another company called At Stake, got it. Corey Thomas, who's our CEO here, totally gets it. So for somebody who does what I do for a living, we're still, I mean, this industry of or field of human resources is still struggling to be respected. And, people talk about getting a seat at the table and all this
hmm
stuff. It's just stuff, right? It like, you don't focus on that. Focus on like having something impactful to say if you're actually at the table. And that's how you stay there. And I think
hmm
a lot of CEOs who didn't believe in culture or who weren't totally dialed into it, is something they learned in business school. It wasn't something they were truly adapting to their companies, took the pandemic and thought, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to navigate any of this right now. So I think the role of the chief people officer became really valued during that time. But then I
hmm
think it's, what do you do with that? And I think
hmm
that relationship between, the people officer and the CEO you saw some really good partnerships coming out of the last couple of years just by sheer necessity. But culture has, if, I've been taking a bet on culture for 30 years at this point. And when I started my career, it wasn't a thing. I just
Yeah.
sort of dialed into what I thought was the right thing.
Yeah.
And over the years, it's easy to say you're part of a good culture when the business is performing. Right?
Yes, when things
And
are
it was
going well.
and at the for the pandemic hit, and I'm like, this is the first time that everything that I believe in is actually being put to the test. And I remember, we sent people home on a Thursday, and we had, I think it was 34 people starting the following Monday. And it was always had been in person, and we were like, what in
Yeah.
the hell are we going to do to onboard
Yeah.
these people? And everything that we believe in, the soul of our culture, came together over those couple days, and we rolled out something to onboard those people within a handful of days. And it was like we had never not done that. And I thought, oh my God, my bet was actually
I've been
correct.
right this whole time. I've
I'm
been
like,
right.
oh my God. And it was like 2020, I sound like a crazy person. 2020 was the favorite year of my career because it
Wow.
put
I have
everything
not.
that I know, probably don't, a lot of people don't say that, but
No, for sure.
I didn't love 2021, I'll tell you that. But 2020 was fantastic because I got to put everything that I had believed in to the
Holy
test, and I got
camoli.
to find new ways to do it. And how do you engage people when you can't be together and all of that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I feel very grateful.
All right, one last question and then we'll wrap it up, which is kind of been curious myself, and I've been, wanting to kind of, as you've gone through, how does someone, what do you look for? You're talking about you've worked for a few CEOs that get the culture. Is there a way to, when you're entering an organization or interviewing or even just observing, being from the outside, how do you know that a CEO gets the culture?
Um,
I mean, I guess you could also say, I got to work with them for a little bit and I don't know,
no,
Josh,
I mean,
that's crazy, but
I think because if you're taking a job, you have to make a bet really quickly.
you do.
So I think for me, it was always about what's their leadership style? How do they communicate what's important to them? And then digging, not just like any CEO is going to tell you, I care about the people. Da, 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 da. Like you got to dig deeper than that. And, what's your leadership style? How do you handle things when they go wrong? And I think the highlighted piece of anything I say there is really being willing to ask the tough questions and kind of go there with them. If you think about the most effective chief people officers I've ever known are those that are willing to get in the ring and have the tough conversations. You know, I look at, I'm really, really fortunate. Our CEO is probably one of the smartest human beings I've ever met. We sit like very un-COVID friendly, like 4 inches away from each other. Our desks are attached. And we've been sitting like that for years. And I think one of the things that we've built is like, we really trust each other. He knows that I'm not after anything. I'm not trying to get promoted. I'm not gaming him for any reason. I'm just here to help him be as successful as we
Mm,
can be
mm.
in this company. And I trust him. He trusts me. We have really difficult conversations. We battle it out a little bit sometimes, but being able to be that voice of reason or be that voice of challenge is something that I think probably a lot of people in my role don't love doing. You know, they get into it like, you know, the thing that drives me crazy is like, I love people. That's why I got into this field. Like at this point in my life, I'm not even sure I like people anymore. You know, we've been through so much. I'm joking, of course,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
know, I think the value that I brought isn't just from a cultural lens, but you know, really holding us accountable to making sure that we're not just talking a good game, but we're actually living that. I view success in my job as like, I want people to feel like this is absolutely the best place that they've ever worked in their career journey.
Mm,
They've learned, they've grown, they felt like they contributed something valuable, and they had some fun along the way. And like, I think if that's, you know, where you're focused, work can be like one of the best things in your life.
yeah.
Um,
It
and
can be additive to
yeah,
your
I mean, like
life
I get
experience.
anxious about the thought of retiring because
Yeah,
at some point it's going to happen.
yeah.
I have been so fortunate to have had the career in the companies that I have
Amazing.
because I love what I do and I love the people that I do it with. That's a gift.
Amazing. Amazing. Christina Luconi, Chief People Officer at Rapid 7. You can check them out, rapid7thenumber.com. Thank you so much, Christina. This was really just enlightening, and I don't know. I appreciate the difficult conversation and how we're sort of exploring that together. So thank you for coming on and sharing a little bit about of your experience and your perspective with Great Mondays Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.